I ended up wanting to do something on adult literacy. So as I began to do some research in adult literacy, I came upon this statistic, and it was really frightening. Because when you're an adult that has literacy difficulties, you always think you're the only person in the world. And so even after I had taken courses in my master's, I was still quite surprised to find out, according to the Canadian Council on Learning, they put out a report in 2008. And according to that report, some research that they did, almost half of all Canadians at that time, over the age of 16, experienced some degree of difficulty in their ability to read, write, and understand effectively in English and or French. And so I just thought the statistic was staggering. And the more I read on the subject, the more information came about that supported this. Unfortunately, and this is from 2008, unfortunately, that still seems to be the case in terms of what the research is showing. So when I started to look at doing a project, I wanted to use some sort of adult literacy measurement, because what I found was a lot of literacy agencies either have their own measurements, everybody kind of uses different things. And so I decided to use Human Resources and Skills Development Canada's measurement. And what they do is they include, along with adult literacy, so the reading and writing, they also include numeracy, document use, and problem solving. And so they use a scale of 1 to 5, level 1 obviously being the lowest and level 5 the highest, and to measure where someone is in terms of their literacy skills. But also, according to their indicator, they say, HRSDC, that individuals should be at a level 3 to be able to navigate Canadian society successfully. So this was the measurement I was using in my project. And I'll talk now a little bit about the research project. This was my question. Will individuals with low literacy skills feel empowered after learning how to create content with digital technology? So that's what I wanted to explore. And so I approached the social service agency in Oshawa, and they were very welcoming because UOIT had done previously a project with them, and they had enjoyed the project so much, they had enjoyed the process so much that they kind of welcomed me with open arms. So I had no issues at all finding a place to run the project. So I thank Dr. Jeanette Hughes for that, because she opened the door in that sense at the social service agency, and that worked out really well. And I went to them because they had a basic literacy program that was set up in a way that I think would I'd be able to do this project the way I wanted to do it. The facilitators looked for the participants, and what I asked the facilitators to do was just find people that are at a literacy level between 2 and 3, according to that measurement that I was using, and as well that had little or no exposure to digital technology, but that were open to learning. So I definitely didn't want people in the project that didn't want anything to do with digital technology, because that would be a problem to begin with. And so they did find 7 participants from the ages of 26 to 52. Now, there was just one person who was 26, and then everybody else was about 45 and up, the oldest being 52. And I had my participants, and so I set up the workshop, and it turned out to be a 2-week workshop. I kind of went into the project thinking it'd be very long, 3 or 4 months, but then I sat down and spoke to my master's supervisor, Dr. Allison Emer, and she kind of said, that's going to be very difficult to run something for that, time frame. So let's think of something on a shorter frame, and it worked out really well. On the side there, you'll see my outline for a few of the days. And once the workshop was set up, I sat down with the individuals and interviewed them before the workshop and then after the workshop. And then I also had a focus group session with everyone together at a table, and that ran also after the workshop, so I could get some feedback, but in a group setting. And one concern that the facilitators had at the basic literacy program was that the outline was a bit ambitious, but I told them that I would cut things out if it turned out that there was too much and that the participants were getting overwhelmed. So I went in knowing that I had to be flexible as well. And so the digital workshops were comprised of several different parts. they were going to learn how to blog with iPads using a WordPress app for the iPad, and then they were going to use iPods for photography and video, and then they were going to use MacBooks for editing, and they would be using iMovie as the software application. And so this wasn't what I had envisioned. I had always envisioned that I would just be using iPads with the participants. But it turned out the iPads that I had didn't have a camera, but I was able to secure some iPods and then some MacBooks. And so it just became this process where I would just have to, I would have to present the tools to them, and then hopefully they would adapt and not, feel like they were overwhelmed by all of these things. So again, it was kind of like, let's go in and see what happens, not knowing what would happen. At the beginning, I spoke to the facilitators about having each student create their own blog and that they would post their own stories, pictures to their particular blog. But after speaking to the facilitators, we actually thought that just having one common blog would be great because it would foster a sense of community between the participants, and that's exactly what happened, where participants were posting their stories or their pictures, and others were able to go and find what they had posted and then comment. So this community of people blogging and people commenting all within that group occurred, which was great because it really boosted the self-esteem and amongst the group, and they were enjoying it more because they were doing it in a group setting. And that worked with my framework, which was positioning literacy as a social practice as well. So as I said, I spoke to the participants before the workshop, and a lot of what came out was, I'm scared of technology, but I'm here and I'm determined to learn it. Others were, I don't think I can do this. You just have to be prepared that I just may walk away. I may get frustrated, so I want you to be aware of that. Other people were just neutral. They didn't care either way, which I thought was strange. They had no opinion. But they were there because their facilitator at the literacy program had said it might be a good thing. And so they were open to it, but they weren't excited. And then I had other people that just said, I'm not sure I can do this. I really don't believe in my abilities to learn. I'm still having difficulties with numeracy and reading and writing. I just want you to be aware of that. And so out of all of the interviews, reading them, there seemed to be mostly a sense of hopelessness and also a lack of enthusiasm in terms of the digital technology that was going to be presented to them. So the workshops ran, and I'll talk a little bit more about the work they did. But after the workshops, I interviewed the participants again, and there was definitely a different feeling. In terms of the individual interviews, people were using words like, I feel I accomplished something, I'm very excited about the work I did, I told everybody the day before that I was putting a video up and they're excited about that. And the big comment here, or quote, comes from a person who said that she actually found it much easier to write with the iPad, and that she was able, the words were able to just kind of flow out of her, as opposed to when she had a paper and a pencil in front of her. Sometimes she could be sitting there for days. So definitely the tool allowed her to express herself easier. And she really enjoyed using it, although she said she just did not like to write with a paper and pencil. So that was interesting as well. And so here are some digital works. So this is an image by Richard. And I did teach the students how to use the iPod to take photographs. That's something that I do as well, and I teach at Durham College. And they had all of maybe about a 40-minute workshop telling them how to frame, talking a little bit about photography. And they went out a couple of times to take pictures, and this is one photo from a participant called Richard, who had actually never used an iPod at all, but who had never really, I think he said he'd never taken a photo that he could think of, like he'd never really used a camera. And so he did some amazing work. This is by Saba, and what she did, it looks like it's some Photoshop, but actually it isn't. When we were out, she saw some plastic plexiglass that was part of a playground that had a cloud, clouds reflecting on it. And then she asked somebody to go behind. Yes, it was. And And then she took the picture, and it was amazing. The creativity, it was so creative, and she came up with it on the spot. She's so proud of herself, and just the work that she was doing, within, an hour of learning how to use an iPod to take photographs was amazing. So she's really putting a lot of thought into how she wanted to compose the photos, which was very nice. And this is a timeline for iMovie, and Aaron created this digital narrative. And what he did was he added music, he added his voice, he added photos, he added video, and it became very complex, but he enjoyed doing it. And he actually was a participant that created 3 digital narratives during the workshop. Although I had hoped that each person would at least complete 1, he was able to complete 3 because he really enjoyed doing this, and he just understood it so well once I showed him the basics. And I don't know if I can play this. Maybe I can. This is a short video of a digital narrative by Saba. And so what Saba did, she saw that we were casting shadows during our walk about when we were out taking photos, and she started to position people in certain ways so that she could get photos of these shadows. And then she put it all together with iMovie, adding music as well. And again, she did this really, really quickly, and was so proud of her work at the end that ended up being posted on the blog, and then people were commenting on it. So she really enjoyed that. So some other interesting findings from the workshop was that the transference of knowledge from one tool to the other in a sort of staggered manner worked really well. So we went from the iPads to the iPod to the editing with the MacBook. And so when I had the participants come in for the first time to start using the iPads, I set out the iPads, and they all sat down in front of the iPads, but nobody would actually pick one up or look at it. And so I showed them how to turn it on and what to do, swiping, etc. And then they learned that. And they practiced using the iPad for 2 or 3 days, and they were blogging. And then the next step was the iPod. And so I did the same thing where I left the iPods on the table, and they all sat down, but they didn't wait for me to tell them, here, pick it up, this is how you turn it on. They just transferred the knowledge from the iPad to the iPod, and they started working with it. And it was just that confidence that you could see when they were handling the tools that made all the difference, I think, for them and for me when I was looking at them, that definitely they felt a lot more confident now using it. So by the time we got to the MacBooks with iMovie, nobody was saying anything about, oh, I don't think I can do this, although, editing is a bit, a little bit more complicated in terms of like learning the basics and figuring out how things go together. It's like a puzzle. But everybody was very open to it, and as I said, I had hoped at least each of them would finish a narrative, but we had participants do 2, and then one participant actually created 3 narratives in the time frame that I'd set out, which was like a day and a half. So that was really amazing. It's just they really enjoyed that part, the editing. And then another finding that was aside from everything else that I was looking at was the fact that some of the participants at the end, when they had their interviews in the focus group, they felt that they could now become agents of change within their own groups and communities. And so there's a quote from Marcy, who was a person who showed a lot of fear of technology, but also lack of confidence, and actually said, I just don't know if I can do this. And at the end of 2 weeks, he's just saying, now I want to actually teach other people what I've learned. And there were a couple of people in the group that kind of took on this mentoring sort of position within the group, that people would go to them when they needed help, and they would tell them, okay, this is what you need to do, or offer advice. And they really enjoyed that. And it was funny because the 2 people that I saw really get into those roles were people that had said to me, I don't think I could do this. And it was amazing just at the end to see how they were now helping other people. And also how their goals had changed in terms of what they wanted to do in their lives, and just thinking more, looking at a larger picture as opposed to very narrow. They certainly were changing their viewpoint in terms of what they wanted to do in their lives. So thank you very much for watching this presentation. You can actually you can see the complete project on my website, which is there. And I guess I'll take questions now, if there are any. Mhm. Yes. See if I'll just go back this way to make it easier. Oh, there it is. There it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, I guess, first of all, can you speak to maybe what was your biggest surprise about how all of this unfolded? So you talked about some of the things that delighted and surprised you a little bit, with respect to what you were expecting when you went in, and then how things actually unfolded. Can you pinpoint one or two things that really were eye-openers for you? One thing. Can you repeat the question before you actually respond to it? Oh, okay. So Dr. Allison Emer has asked me to talk about something that surprised me coming out of the workshop that I wasn't expecting. And one thing I wasn't expecting was this could be seen as a bad thing as well, or good, and I've looked at it from both sides. I was the facilitator of the workshop, but I was also the researcher, and that poses problems. However, by the end, when we had our focus group, we were all having a very nice conversation, and people were being very open, and they wanted to ask me questions about my background and my life and what I was doing, and I thought that was great. And in the end, one of the participants said, "You're now one of us." And I felt that was just their way of saying, "We accepted you," and that was very surprising to me. Now, some people may say, you're not supposed to be accepted by the group that you're researching, but I felt actually that the responses that I got from them, I believe they opened up more to me because they trusted me and felt that I was part of their group, as opposed to somebody that was just going to do some research and then leave. So again, I know that there's always an issue when you become part of the group that you're researching, but I felt in a way that it helped me. So that surprised me, that I hadn't realized that. I had kind of become part of that group as the facilitator of the workshop, but I hadn't realized that until somebody actually pointed it out to me. So as I said, it's a difficult position, but it surprised me. I'll just say, so the second part of my question is that I'm not sure that Anna gave herself enough credit with respect to the makeup of the students in her group. They were very, very diverse, so people who are going through for their BEds will recognize terms like differentiated instruction, but these people were from all walks of life with all kinds of different educational challenges. There was a woman with neurological damage. There were people who were at various levels of literacy skills. And so I wondered if you could just speak to how much of what people brought with them in terms of proficiency levels and educational background impacted on their experience with the technology that you shared with them. So there was a person, as I said, who was younger, 26, and she was very comfortable with the technology because she had an iPhone. However, I had thought when I interviewed them and they had let me know about their levels of comfort with technology and experience, I had thought that she would actually possibly be a person that would show others what to do. But that ended up not being the case. Not because she wasn't able. I think she just wasn't interested. She was a bit younger than everybody, and so her interests were somewhere else. So then it was the people that were 45 and up that it was interesting to see how many of them said, I have a cell phone, but I just use it to call. Or I have a cell phone, but I'm not even sure how it works. And that's why they were scared of the iPad or iPod. Many of them said, my children have brought one into the house, or my son's girlfriend had one and I actually touched it, but that's all I did. I didn't go any further than that. There seemed to be this fear of, I just don't want to touch it because I might break it. It was interesting to see that. But the people that were either neutral or said, I don't like digital technology, I know it's something I have to do, but it's not something I want to do, I'm just doing it because I'm forced, those, I noticed that they were the ones that actually took to it and then became kind of mentors to other people. And I think it was just they got over that kind of hill where they're like not clear on what they can do, but the moment they feel comfortable with the technology, now they're comfortable with it and they're willing to go and show other people how to use it, and they're so proud of themselves. And so many of them, it was interesting because many of them have kids at home, and some of the kids were in high school or at the point where they're going to go into post-secondary, and their parents are at a basic literacy program. But what they kept saying was, I want to show how my son or my daughter what I've done here. Some of the interviews afterwards where they're talking about how they told their kids, or they were showing their kids the projects and how proud they felt, how their kids responded to their projects was just, you just felt like crying at times because they were so emotional about it. So I hope that answers. Okay. So the question is, how long was the project in total? So the workshops ran for 2 weeks, and I was going in every day for 2 weeks for about, I was supposed to only be there for 4 hours, but some days I was there just a little bit longer, like maybe 5 or 6 hours. And that was all before, so the interviews were separate from that. The actual workshops were, I guess, 10 workshops over a period of 2 weeks.
I know that you commented earlier in your earlier question about the difficulties of being a workshop leader, facilitator, and being a researcher at the same time. My own background, my own dissertation was doing action research with 2 groups of teachers. I was facilitating one of them, and the other one was being facilitated by another individual. So I found that actually it was a great source of opportunity to explore areas that the teachers weren't aware of beforehand, and it became a major cornerstone of the findings in my own dissertation work as well. So could you comment on the other side of it? What are the implications of not having the opportunity to have input into the questions that are being available for participants, etc.?
Well, I found that because I was kind of within the group facilitating, I was closer to what they were doing. So if they were talking to each other, whispering because somebody was having difficulty with something or somebody had had this aha moment, I was there to see that because I was in the middle of it all. And I afterwards, reflecting on the whole experience, I thought to myself, if I was 2 tables away, I probably wouldn't have caught that. So then that definitely shapes then the questions that you're going to ask the participants when you're doing the final interview. It also shapes the research because I think it's those little moments that that can give you a lot of insight into certain things. I think when they were reacting to something that they had learned, I was there to see it, and I wasn't 2 tables away where I might not see the whole reaction or not see it at all. And that was important because then I could make a mental note, write it down, and say, Marcy was overwhelmed. I thought she was about to burst into tears when she saw her first post up and somebody commented on it. And then I think because I was in the middle of the group and they had grown accustomed to me and were okay with having me there, then they were open to talk about all sorts of things, such as some problems that they had with the iPad. So within a day, I heard some of them talking to each other saying, oh, this is great, but I have, like, my finger, it's not swiping the way it should, and I have to do it several times. And so I thought, well, I'll just go get a stylus, and I'll give it to each of them. And that made all the difference. So most of them began to then use the stylus as opposed to their finger. That was something that they might not decide to come and tell me, but I heard them commenting, and then that helped, because otherwise they might get frustrated with the iPads if they were just using their finger and it's not working the way it should. So.
Yeah, it doesn't have much to point out.
Yes.
The other thing that I'd like to ask you to just elaborate on a little bit is the issues that come as a result of interposing yourself right into the groups and has an effect on reliability and validity.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with that when you are part of the actual group that's generating the data? How do you extract yourself, or can you?
I think I can't say that I can fully extract myself, but I read a lot on it in terms of people who had done projects that way, and then how they were compiling their data and what they had to say about it, just to help me understand. You're part of that group, and then it's almost like you have a common language, which is very helpful. But when I was writing my notes later on in the afternoon after the workshop, I made sure that I was using different language. And that kind of, I think, reading back then my notes, it was not like I was part of the group. I was now putting on my researcher hat. So that helped me in a way. But I'd be lying to say that I totally extracted myself and was able to do that. I just, again, had to just kind of switch hats, but not while I was there. I would do that at home when I was writing my notes out and do it from a different perspective.
I think you're moving in the direction of triangulation, where you have to use that kind of terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about? When you're switching your hat, you're looking at a different, or looking at the data from a different perspective, and you're using that to counterbalance what you were using in the first place. And if you still found the same findings, then you've got a little bit more sense of, it's not just me making it up.
Exactly, yeah. And I think so. And also, because it was qualitative, it was strictly qualitative as well, I think that allows a little bit more to allow what I was doing, simply because I guess it just gives the researcher a bit more license in terms of being able to look at the data from a different perspective, because it was strictly qualitative.
Okay. It's also more dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
because what I was talking about before, just because you're seeing it from two different perspectives and you're still finding the same findings, or you're reading it the same way, I find it very, very difficult to say, well, that's not just me and my own bias that is allowing me to see that. So I guess the next question would be, could we find somebody else who is close enough to the data so that they could verify those kinds of findings, and that would give me a little bit more in that way of reliability and validating the actual findings that I've got.
Right.
So inter-rater reliability issues.
Yeah, and so I guess that's when your master supervisor comes in and looks at the project, and Allison was working closely with me and did visit the literacy program a couple of times as well. So that then becomes, but it's a difficult position, and I put a lot of thought into it, and actually wrote about that in my paper, but I feel in the end, it wasn't a limitation. That's my personal opinion based on what I did and my thoughts on what occurred. But other people may look at it and see it as a limitation.
There's another interesting part to this, that because, you know, well, numbers are inherently more objective, right?
Supposedly.
It's a danger.
Yeah.
Coming from a science background.
Yes. And
I don't know that there's much that you can do to validate numbers over qualitative stuff. So yeah, I agree. A lot more flexibility on the qualitative side, but it's still the same danger either way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
I'm just going to wrap up if you don't mind. Just one or two words for the sake of those folk who are still on screen. We have come to the end of the session for today, and this has been absolutely fabulous, I think. Again, thank you to the entire team. Many of them, of course, are in this room at the time. Amy's had to leave already, but thank you so very much for your work, Jeanette and Allison and Amy and Kim, of course, who've been putting all the materials together. There is a very, very short evaluation form that is available if you go to the Twitter feed and you look up the actual hashtag that we've been using, and that will bring you to a Fluid Surveys 2-page survey. It'll take all of 5 minutes, and it would certainly help us an awful lot in terms of evaluating the day and making some changes and improvements for next year as well. So thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to seeing you again next year when it's somebody else's job. Oh, you're welcome. Have a great weekend. And it's not snowing yet.
Go kiss your Valentine.
Yeah.